Born in Korea, Mee Ok Icaro was renamed Mandy by her white evangelical parents who adopted and raised her in California and Arkansas. After narrowly escaping conversion therapy but unable to avoid sitting next to Sarah Huckabee Sanders in Spanish class, she attended Boston University to study philosophy and the classics, but ended up majoring in partying, sleep, and girls. 10 years later, she graduated and worked at Harvard as a research assistant in an office next to Timothy Leary's old digs, while taking courses in history, film, medicine, literature, and German. After being diagnosed with scleroderma and given 5 years to live, Miok was bedridden for 3 years until she began drinking ayahuasca, a shamanic brew from the Amazonian jungle, which gave her back her legs. She eventually obtained her MFA in creative writing, studying poetry, prose, and drama. Since then, she has been writing, pursuing the path of earth medicines, and trying to become the person she was meant to be.
That's it. That's it in a nutshell.
I mean, when was that written, the bio?
Oh, maybe, God, when did, it was written during COVID. That's when I was doing my website. Yeah.
Okay, wow. So like almost 4 years ago?
Something like that. Yeah.
Whoa, okay. How do you feel about the bio, like listening to it now?
It's funny. It's true, but it's just funny the way that, that the world looked at that time.
Oh, say more. Like, what
Well,
does the world look like now? Yeah, go ahead.
well, just so much has happened between now and then. So I'm looking at the person who wrote that, being like, you have no idea what's going to happen in the next 5 years.
What did happen in the next 5 years?
Well, I finished my manuscript for my memoir. I got an agent in New York, and then I took a hiatus. My mom died, and that took me to a whole new place.
Mm.
I moved out of the States, so I had no idea that was going to happen. And I became much more connected to the jungle. I had a huge, talking about Paradise Lost, I had sort of my own fall from quote unquote grace with a toxic God man. And yeah, and just sort of found myself on a solitary path that led me to coaching, which I did not expect, life purpose coaching. And also I thought I was just going to do more like writing and teaching writing and things like that, to supporting active plant medicine, because that was one of the stories that I told myself, was that I like to support people outside of ceremony, but I would never want to support people who are actively on medicine. And that has changed. So,
Oh, why
yeah,
has it
so,
changed?
well, I think that I just I think that some of it was that I sort of glorified people in those spaces and the way that they showed up, because there has been some really powerful space that's been held for me at different times. But then getting to know those people outside of that sort of disenchanted me, and I became a bit disillusioned by it. And I just kind of got called into it to put together retreats. And in my first retreat, I didn't participate and actively support the active medicine. I was sort of on call and available if someone asked for me. But then
Mm.
I found out that the facilitators lied to, or one of the facilitators lied to a guest who asked for me. And so after that, I was like, no, I'm going to be part of ceremony. Like my
Mm.
mama bear came out, because especially in the ceremony space, when people are connecting to the medicine for the first time and searching for their truth, don't lie to them.
Yeah.
So I realized that it's kind of like, when you want something done right and you're the one in the group, in like in school, when there was a group project and you were the one that wanted the A, like you just have to steer that ship. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, there's two main things I want to ask you about that. Uh, Well, there's obviously we can go into ceremony because that's its own whole thing, but then I also would like going back to a little bit like rewinding a little bit and like asking you like if you could like add in some things to your bio today, like what I mean, would you revise it and add stuff in or take stuff out?
Well, it's interesting because it's like we have different containers, and yeah, every education, no matter if it's like in the sacred realm, if it's in martial arts, if it's in culinary school, if it's in like purebred academia, there are what seems like just hurdles, or marks of ascension. And so I think, right now I'm not sure, I'm not sure if it's like my undergraduate thesis or if it's my like PhD dissertation. Um, but the 1 year diet is the year that in medicine, or in plant medicine, where for people becoming, active healers who serve medicine and chant medicine songs for people in the ceremony space, that's what they do. That's your black belt to be able to go in and kick ass during the ceremony space, or I guess channel and go into a trance to work on others and do surgery, energetic surgery on others. That's not the intention that I have, but there has been a long and steady process of almost 10 years leading up to the capacity and ability to be able to do that. So that is something that I mention because I do think it's a very important credential when doing plant medicine work with people, is to know that they've been doing diets. That's imperative. And that they did those diets when they were not working, that they were real, true diets.
Mm. Yep, yep, yep. And working, you mean like exchanging your time and energy for ceremonies?
Yeah, that you weren't serving other people and at the beck and call of other people who were dieting while you
Mm.
were dieting, because there's a lot of dishonesty that happens in that space, a real lack of integrity that can happen in that exchange. And also that those diets were done, or at least the majority of those diets were done in the jungle in person.
Yep.
Obviously, when you get to the level of a 1 year diet, like it's not even possible to stay in Peru as a non-Peruvian for over 6 months. But, there should be a lot of diets in the jungle.
Yeah, yeah. So I wanted to ask you, like, you said, that's not, you had said, like, oh, my intention isn't to like serve medicine, like to other people, right? So what is your intention in doing the year-long dieta?
Well, I think in order to be a facilitator, because there's so much abuse in the facilitator space,
Mm.
so much, like you hear horror stories, and there certainly are really big horror stories coming from bad actors serving ayahuasca. Like there's plenty of those, but there may be even more with facilitators. And again, it's because there's a different bar for facilitators. It's like it's not for a lot of these centers who are looking to, bring in business, and business is their top priority. There's a sort of idea that like you just need a therapy degree, or you just need kind of those papers that certify people in the Western world, but it has to be accompanied by the also that medicine path. Like you have to have two education. You essentially kind of have to have a dual degree of some sort. Like you need to have done a lot of dieting in the medicine world, and also you need to, have some sort of certification. Um, and maybe not even need that certification, but yeah, I would say, yeah, I think it's a good idea to have that certificate. It's good to have mentoring, and some sort of like track that had some organization, and has also some degree of like has a code of ethics involved in that, embedded in that. Um, and so what you end up having is a lot of people who have one or the other. And for the people who really emphasize the sort of Western training and Western education, because that's kind of their strong suit, uh, it takes a lot of time and a lot of sacrifice to be able to do this medicine. Like, you have to leave your world, or at least in my opinion, you should leave your world, because ultimately, this is a process of decolonization in the purest sense, to go be with the people who don't have to be decolonized because they weren't. Um, and so they're not having to find their way back. They never lost their way out of it, or, had it coerced out of them. So I think what I've seen is that for people who do go down the medicine path in this way, to this degree of seriousness with the plants, it's often, again, this is my opinion, people don't like it, but it does tend to me, it strikes me as ego, because they want to serve medicine. And actually, I think that, like much of the global north or the west, we just always think we're supposed to be the star of the show, and we don't know how to be an ally. With plant medicine, I really feel that that's our role, and that as close as we can to do that training, to get to the level where we can hold that space, because there is a particular trust that's built between the Shipibo and the maestros and yourself, the deeper into the plant you go. There are just certain things they can't share with you unless there's plants for their plants to talk to. They're not
Mhm.
talking to you, they're talking to your plants. And if they're not there, the bridge can only be so strong. There can only be so many arches in that bridge.
Wow. Wow. And so I mean, you don't have to share your intention if you don't want to, but is it just to become like a better facilitator?
It
Better,
is.
yeah.
The medicine has, because I've set this intention of facilitating and holding space outside or adjacent to the Maloka or the active ceremonial space. And it's not like I'm completely useless inside the Maloka either. Like, I'll blow smoke on people and, do a few little things, but I'm not a maestro. It's like you need a doctor and you need a nurse in the room, right? Like, you need a doctor who's performing the surgery, but you also need someone there to care for the patient, make sure
Mm,
the patient is as comfortable and not, moving around or being so uncomfortable that the doctor can't continue the surgery because the patient can't sit still, right? And so, once that really became my, once it really became my intention to become a backup dancer for these amazing people whose work I don't think you can do unless you're from the jungle and from their lineage, the medicine really showed me uh, what the facilitation space could be. And it was very much informed by all the crappy facilitation experiences I've had, and the really dark, or, at best, the incompetent spaces that I've been in, or the really unconscious spaces that I've been in doing my own work. And the medicine was able to show me a lot of teachings from those spaces, and how, why was it like that? What rule or what principle could have been in place to where that wouldn't have even been a possibility. So I
mm.
thought about this for a long time. But when I became a facilitator, and then when I learned about coaching, and I learned about the idea of becoming like a master coach, which is an actual like certification, I was like,
Wow.
like maestro coaching, to become like a maestra facilitator, to be in a high standard of plant medicine, but in the service and with skills to support the space. And again, be an ally to these people who ultimately should be front and center, but for many reasons, including just simple logistical reasons, like they don't speak English and often don't speak a colonized language to a degree that to where they can really express themselves fully, or in a manner that they would consider, what they would like to be doing. Um, you know, that that's kind of what I saw, and that's what my intention is just to support them. It's a lot like in coaching. It's like People are like, well, what do you do? And it's just like, well, it's not my agenda, it's your agenda. And so I'm kind of trying to show up for the Shipibo and this family in particular to just, what do you need? And let me see how I can help, the skills that I have that could be useful to you, how they could be used to support you, so that we can like be a partnership.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful intention, you know? Um, because it's like I like what you said about it's like the highest caliber of facilitation, like really you're setting the standard for excellent facilitation, right? To be an excellent nurse, in that space, to be of excellent support, so that they could do what they do best and be the maestros that they are. That answers kind of my question about, most of us are not going to pursue the path you are on, right? Of doing year-long dietas, or even facilitating at all, right? Most people are not going to pursue that path and are not going to be facilitators. So how do you see like the everyday person, um, and non-Indigenous practitioners best supporting traditional lineages?
Going to the jungle and finding your teacher. When I think of professional training, like you have to get, like, I forget what they're called, but like your ongoing credits.
Yeah, continuing education credits.
That's right. Yeah, you can't just be like, and now I'm a therapist, by school, by learning. I'm just gonna like go out and talk to people now. You have to continue. And, especially if you are, facilitating things like ketamine, psilocybin, to me, it's very much out of integrity not to be rooted with real medicine people who can
Mm,
support you, who can protect you, who can keep you clean. And, you have to be doing your own work. And, it's like people will talk and virtue signal to the indigenous all day long. And it's like, well, why isn't that your care provider?
mm,
Like, this should be what we're all rooted in.
mhm.
Um, and, if you want to decolonize, tell me a better way to decolonize because I'm real curious.
Right.
So, just having contact with these people in an authentic way and doing your work with them in their environment, in the medicine of just being in the Amazon, will provide a lot of the consciousness shift that people are trying to get, thinking they can get it doing psychedelics, um, you know, next to a freeway or in a strip mall or wherever the clinics are, right? Um, and so, yeah, just to do it in a holistic way,
Yeah.
not extract something and try to get holistic healing from that extraction, to become more authentic, not to extract these sacred medicines from their roots, but to actually sit and learn from these people. Because when people do that,
Mhm.
they also begin to reimagine the container that is possible
Mhm.
in the West.
Exactly. I agree. You often talked about, the land needs to be able to hold the medicine, right? So then I guess, hearing, I could also see how someone could just take what you said and said, "Oh, I'll just participate in ceremonies in LA." Like, like in a tambo in LA, let's say, right? Or sorry, not a tambo, Mallorca in LA somewhere, you know? But then you talk about the importance of like the land, like the energy of the land needs to be able to support the medicine. What do you mean by that?
Again, it's about colonization, I mean, it's like, I think a lot of people might be resistant to the idea, say, of holding a ceremony in like Elon Musk's mansion or something. But to me, that's all of the West. Like, it's
Mm,
this big one it's like this huge palatial, uh, you know, container of history for a particular kind of people, the exact people who tried to kill this medicine by killing the people who now exist in small, barely populated tribes after such massive genocide. And so, you know, we seem to understand what voting with our dollars means when it has to do with things we care about. And, people don't have a problem understanding shopping at a mom and pop store as opposed to Amazon or Walmart or one of these big, corporations. But there's a failure to understand that the entire psychedelic renaissance is a corporate endeavor. And there's nothing more mom and pops than going to the jungle and supporting these families who own their own centers on indigenous land, the land of their ancestors on the sacred river,
Mm.
that these plants and all of their medicines can be found for the most part, who remember the history of that river close to the beginning of the creation of Earth, to understand creation myths and to hear creation myths that far predate any that we know of in the modern world. I mean, these people and the Aboriginals and the indigenous on Jeju Island in Korea are, and the Kirati, the indigenous people of Nepal, are the people that I've had contact with or have learned about with the living memory that stretches the farthest back. And yeah, that's one reason initially that my sensibilities took me to the classics, because I was so interested in a history, a knowledge, and a people that predated Christianity, that
Mm.
predated the concepts that then developed after Christianity. And then you just kind of realize that everybody's been passing the buck because history is alive. And it's like, oh, well, the Greeks were just the Egyptian. I mean, they were going to India and they were going to Alexandria, like to go to their elite schools. That's where the Harvard and the Oxford were, right? Like, duh, that's why they wore togas. Hello. So, because they were learning from the yogis, um, from the BCs. And, and then when you look at those people, it's like, oh, it goes back to Mesopotamia, and then it goes back, and now it's going back to South America. With this LiDAR technology, they're seeing that there were massive, sophisticated metropolises in South America, in the Amazon. The Amazon was planted probably by people. Like they were intentionally planted as an intentional ecosystem that we now understand as nature, but it is a particular kind of nature. Nature is not the same everywhere you go. So, um, I, yeah, I just, uh, I tend to think that when you, um, like there's that joke, right, that America's just one big Indian burial ground.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that, land, there may be no land on Earth that hasn't had innocent blood spilled on it. But there are places where people know how to clean that energy.
Mm.
And I know people think they're cleaning that energy in the US, but they're still living in it. They're
Mm.
still occupying it with money from their ancestors who killed people. And they haven't, I haven't seen that money been cleaned exactly. And I think you see it somewhat in Germany, where they actually have truth and reconciliation, and people did give up their money. They did give the artworks back. They not only named what they did to the Jews, disabled people, and LGBT in the Holocaust, but they actually gave the shit back. And I haven't seen that happen in the States and in North America.
What do you think that does? That like dirty money, that corrupt, money. What do you think that does to a country, a people?
Well, I think what it does to a lineage is what you can see. The oldest money families, look at them. Look at the kids. They're sick. Um, there's something. about them that's so disconnected to the essence of life.
Mm.
And also, it's like, the older you are, let's take the US, the older your money is, the more it's haunted.
Mm.
Money is life force. Marx called it labor. And that's why he was against capitalism, because he was like, because you can acquire more labor than you could ever have in a lifetime. And so one person, if you're a billionaire, you own like sort of like millions of dead slaves, people who have passed. You have all of their shit,
Mm.
essentially. Um, and so, if you steal something, like if you've got, like you've got hot items that you're selling out of the trunk in like a parking lot or something like that, you're always running. And I think people forget because the generations forget after enough time, but I think the energy is still there. And until you clean it, I think it haunts you. And that's why you have so much suicide, addiction, and all of that, because A, people aren't supposed to have that much money, and that much disconnection from true accountability that money can offer you. And also, it's like anything else. Like what happens to you when you're in an unsanitary, around so much unsanitary energy, you get
Mm.
sick.
So, like, we can think of the opposite end of that being the maestros, from the Shibibo lineage, right? Who are cleansing that energy, pretty much on a weekly basis all the time, right? And they're, yeah.
Well, I think some of them too, and I don't want to blanket this because I am talking so far in really broad strokes. It's not like anyone is better than anyone else.
Right.
Also, uh, certainly there are people doing amazing work who are cleaning their money in many ways, giving it away to causes that have been hurt by whatever ancestor maybe started the path for a certain people, or yeah, that caused the problems, right? And to become part of the solution. And the Shipibo also, it's hard because on the one hand, part of me wants to say like, well, they're not helping themselves, but at the same time, it's like, if you're a Shipibo person who's really doing what you're supposed to do and not one of the bad actors, you're like, don't group me in with those people.
Mm.
But a big problem, I think, just systemically is this lack of accountability. I mean, there's no regulation, and the R word, right, comes with shadows and light as well. But in an unregulated place, the world of ayahuasca is the Wild West, and people are going to exploit that. And because people from our culture don't know how to discern that, or even look to what to discern, people go down to the jungle, they get hurt. There's no way for the Shipibo who are doing this in integrity to be like, hey, can you tell this person to stop saying they're a healer? Like,
Mm.
like what medical license are you going to revoke? What medical
Yeah.
malpractice lawsuit are you going to file? Like, so there isn't that. Um, and again, there's good and bad with that, but it it can be really difficult, and they're still learning about money. I mean, the people have only had money for like 2 generations. And so I think our healers, like I think they just got their first bank account like ever in the family, like 2 months ago or something, so that I could send them money. Um, but yeah, I mean, this is like we live in this really interesting quote unquote globalized time because everybody's living in a different time period.
Mm.
We have uncontacted tribes, and then we have like a group of housewives flying into space on a private commercial air flight. And like this is all happening at the same time on this
Mm.
planet. And in a way, I think that's kind of the point of the planet, is to have so many different dimensions
Mm.
existing at once and everything being true at the same time. It's really interesting.
From the plant's perspective, what do you think how they're feeling about this? Like, it's a conscious sentient being, right? So like what do you think, in your opinion, what do you think the plants are thinking and feeling about, right? The contrast between all the different dimensions, like you said.
Well, I don't know. I think the plants have seen, because I mean, talk about a deep memory, right? And especially beings who can talk to the stones, um, talk to the stardust. Their knowledge, in a sense, I wonder if there's anything they haven't seen.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that there's much that would surprise them. Like maybe
Mm,
they haven't seen exactly this in this particular order or this particular combination, but I just can't imagine that anything about this is new.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine what they're thinking.
Yeah, what do you think people need to know about the plants? Like, what do you like, like if like someone who like what do you wish people knew about the plants?
Well, I think maybe the plants are the least decolonized of us all.
Mm,
And, it doesn't mean that plants can't be domesticated, but not in the way that humans and animals, it's a totally different process. Plants, I believe, have so much healing power because they don't carry any intergenerational trauma. And to be able to connect with something that pure, something I really wish people understood about the plants is that they are the highest level of technology on our planet. Nothing converts energy or light with more efficiency or speed than plants. And so I do wish, I mean, there has to be so much unlearning, but I do wish that people could, without the plants, understand their intelligence and to be able to unravel their ethnocentrism, their anthropocentrism as well. And I think some people do exercise a bit of that. Michael Pollan has a book where he talks about things from like a plant's eye view, where the
oh,
protagonist of the story are, apples and, and it's sort of like, okay, so if that's, but still there's sort of like an anthropomorphizing about it. It's still like, oh, but if an apple kind of, had intentions like a human, and maybe they do, but I think that there is a general like sort of narcissism that our species has because we're having a subjective experience, and we tend to put ourselves just at the center of the universe, and a lot of our journey as a species is becoming more and more decentralized.
mhm,
I think physically that's what happened over the past millennia, or many millennia, where you look at early maps and the sun or the earth is the center of the universe, and the sun's the center of the universe, and now it's like, oh, but we're in a galaxy and there are many galaxies, and it's like, wow, we're like not even in the middle of the galaxy, we're like at the tail, like this random like kind of corner of the universe, like we're not important spatially at all.
mm,
Like not
mhm,
only are we not the center of the universe, but we're in like this random kind of corner of the universe. And right now, that seems to be happening with consciousness, that we're understanding that consciousness isn't like generated by our minds, but we're starting to understand our minds as like antenna for receiving like a general ubiquitous consciousness and aliveness, more in line with the ancients with the chi and prana and things like that. And now And I wish people understood that the plants are probably the best bet to helping us make that shift.
Wow. Ancient technology, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, that's something that you seem to be so like history, like a history buff. Like you know your history, you like to know about, lineages and, traditions and history, but then you're also very good, from what I've seen at least, at like predicting the future. And I think you even said at one point to me that if you know history, you can predict the future. And so like if you were to look ahead, this is actually a question I had here is what oh actually yeah, this is what innovations or collaborations really excite you about the intersection of art and writing, coaching, and plant medicine.
Well, I think what's I think what I love about plant medicine is that no matter where the technology goes, I don't think that this work can be replaced by robots or artificial intelligence, because this work is actually the opposite of that. We're going deeper into natural intelligence. So it's just diametrically opposed to artificial intelligence. That's why, people can cite Grok or ChatGPT to me, and it's just like, yeah, they don't understand anything about the plants because they
Mm,
can't ever, computer will never be able to diet and connect with the spirit of the plant. It's just not, I don't think it's possible. But maybe, there's uh, some technology nerds who think I'm totally wrong, and I might be, but that's kind of what I sense at the moment. And I do think, whenever you look again at any technological revolution, there's always a pushback. And so I'm more excited about the pushback from this, because right now there is sort of this cult among the technocrats that the humans can be replaced, that that computers and machines can be conscious. And I think that actually comes from the history of medicine, in which there was this sort of revolution where the human body became viewed as a machine. And that's when we have prescriptions and one size fits all pills, because you're just a machine. And so there wasn't really a concept or a way to have personalized service
mm.
or a personalized, health paradigm. Um, and so I'm really interested to see, because I think this technology is going to go as far as it can, the extent to which, like, how much is the human replaceable? And
Mm.
I'm really excited to see where it fails and for it to be on full display, so that maybe we'll start really valuing what's truly human.
Wow, I'm excited for that too now.
Yeah. I think it's gonna be painful to get there, but I am excited about that.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I like, you mentioned like shadow, light, we can't, it's almost like we can't get to the light unless we like address the shadows, or like at the same time, not just shadow, not just light, has to happen sort of in conjunction with each other together, as we evolve. Yeah, yeah. Um, so if we can actually, so I'm looking at the questions now and rewinding again because I like tabbed the conversation around ceremonies. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've actually experienced ceremonies now and shit is wild. Shit is crazy. In the best way, of course, but like not really like when you're in it. So can you describe for folks who like are like, what even the heck happens in ceremonies? I feel like that maybe first before anything about dietas. Because to me, the whole like dietas, when you were talking about dietas like at the retreat, it completely like it just expanded my mind about the whole plant world and like plant medicine in general. But I think I would have been curious about the ceremonies first and foremost. Like, so it's kind of like a question from me 3 months ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, most people, I think, especially going to their first ayahuasca retreat, is like the ayahuasca, right? And that's how a lot of these businesses model it, is that it's about the ayahuasca. It's important that people know that there's ayahuasca there too, because maybe they don't want to do ayahuasca. So you don't want to like, put it out there as like, oh, we're going to be healing with plants and detoxing and things like that. It's just like, no, we're going to be doing ceremonies. So it's important, it's significant. But even talking about ayahuasca, it's almost like an infinite, um, I mean, talking about ayahuasca without dietas is something that our culture is doing through extraction, but you actually can't separate them because that's
Mm.
what ceremonies are. They're just not your diets. They're not your plants. They're the plants of the healers. And so, at least in the Shipibo tradition, um, it's the ceremonies take place in a maloka. The healers clean the space energetically so that it is a sanitized space, appropriate for spiritual surgery. They begin by chanting to the room with the medicine songs to protect the space, to protect themselves, to protect the participants. Because when you have ceremony, and it's a lot of energy, and so all the bad energy wants to come and party too. Like if people hear there's a party, there's always going to be like some really nasty beings that want to come and be part of the party. So they have to make sure that the bouncers are all set up at the doors, and that only those with permission, only the energies with permission can enter the space. And so, the participants take ayahuasca, but it's totally unnecessary for them to do so. In fact, for thousands and thousands of years, like that was never ever done until Westerners came because they wanted to try it. But it was always meant for people with the proper training to actually experience ayahuasca, which is another reason that the psychedelic renaissance is sort of having the sort of impact that it is. Like people won't allow ayahuasca ceremonies even around Oaxaca because people are dying after ceremony. That people don't know what they're doing. They don't know that it's about the diets. And so, but essentially in these ceremonies, the healers are, they are essentially a spiritual garden of plants that they have acquired and built a relationship through the process of dieting. And they go around and they are essentially in a trance, and they are able to channel these various plants that they've dieted and even plants that they haven't dieted. But these plants come through, they know how to connect with the healers. The healers then chant their medicine songs into the person, and that is actually what is doing the healing. The fact that the person has drank ayahuasca isn't so vital. It's just a matter of whether or not they want to have an experience, how connected they want to be to what is being cleaned out and what the healer is actually doing. But the healers, instead of ingesting a physical medicine, they are actually dosing you through their medicine songs, but they're dosing you with specific plants in that process. Through that process, you will purge whatever darkness is in you, whether they're heavy emotions, dark memories, a physical illness, a spiritual illness. They're cleaning that. It's essentially cleaning. So if you're just doing ayahuasca, you're not actually getting that medicine. You're just sort of like open. And it doesn't mean that you can't do some work and that you can't have some breakthroughs, but you're not really going to deep levels. So like people who are just drinking ayahuasca, not in without indigenous people, like they're essentially doing a drug, and even though it may be well intentioned and they may be getting something out of it, it's nothing like you know like it's like we're not doing ayahuasca, we're doing the diets, we're doing
Mm.
plant medicine. It's totally different than the psychedelic model. And so they will go and they will clean people. Um, these people have been supported through things like flower baths, so that the plants will actually work with them. Um, they will allow the participants to go into the visionary realm as opposed to just hallucinating. Like most people just sort of stay in the throes of their minds when they're doing psychedelics. Again, it doesn't mean that you can't make a connection, but that's more of like an accident rather than uh, an actual like working with someone who has a method of getting you there every time, right? And holding the space in a particularly medicinal way. And so they will go through. It's a process of surgery, and and then after the ceremony closes, they close the person so the person is safe and they're protected. Um, and yeah, and then they close out.
Wow. Thank you for walking me through, because I think like that's something I didn't understand, honestly, before the retreat. I didn't understand um that it's not about the medicine. Like it's not about ingesting the medicine. It's about the dieta. It's about, the months of preparation, and connecting with the plant without even ingesting a single drop of it. you know um and so I remember you were telling me, or maybe I read somewhere, that when you first began with ayahuasca, someone had mentioned it to you, and then you were like bedridden, so then you decided to drink ayahuasca on your own, and you still had some really great experiences. Like I think you described seeing the earth like from in space, and really getting that bird's eye view, zoomed out. How was that experience of you ingesting ayahuasca on your own different for you from partaking in ceremonial space with maestros?
I think that when part of the medicine when you're from such a toxic culture, part of the medicine of any medicine, which is why psychedelics are having such a huge impact with those from our culture, is just getting out of our minds is a lot of medicine. Just not being who we are.
Mm,
And in the grand cultural and national stories that we live our lives in and understand ourselves by is a
mhm,
lot of medicine. But it's only the beginning. The big part of the journey, I think, is finding our ways back to, we understand the concept of our authentic selves or our original selves, but those selves are not modern. Those selves are not domesticated. Like there's a wildness to it, and it's like we want to connect to our ancestors, but like to when?
mm,
Our ancestors until they started wearing like suits and ties, like what ancestors are you talking about? And these people understand that they understand their ancestors to be these plants. And we understand things through the language of modern science, but science isn't really saying anything different. It understands that, you look at a mushroom, it shares a lot of human DNA. Like we clearly, like modern science is like, yes, we descended from like amoebas, right? Like from bacteria, like we are, evolutionarily, it's not just, oh, we came from the first mammal. Like, no, it goes back and back and back. And so it's just that Western modern science is just way too slow, like it's on the shortest bus. The, the plant medicine, the indigenous, they always understood this and they never got disconnected from this knowledge. Um, so I forgot what you asked me. I got on a roll. Um,
that's okay.
uh,
Oh, oh, I think you also kind of answered the question too.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, around like, you ingesting the ayahuasca on your own
Oh,
versus like actually being held in a ceremonial space by a
yeah.
maestro. Mhm.
So I think, the medicine just offered me this idea that maybe I'm just not what I've always been told I had to be.
Mm.
And just that being new, and that being something that I could experience from the inside, because we all have people in our lives who, it's like, this is why we could fix other people's problems, but we can't fix ourselves, because it's really hard to be like us. Like, it's just hard to be you. Like,
Like ourselves.
it's
Hmm.
hard to be like a first person I. Super hard,
Mm. Yeah.
right? And so there are all these things that that we've heard over and over again that we know intellectually, but it doesn't mean that like, oh, now we can quit smoking, or now we can just like exercise and eat healthy every day, or whatever it is that we're aiming to do. Like, if understanding things intellectually was all that was needed, people at Harvard wouldn't, have like a million therapists and be on like the most pharmaceuticals of like any population. I feel like the you know that's so clearly not enough. um and so I think that there was a lot of medicine for me just to take off the rigid confines of how I had sort of organized my intellectual energy, and really freed me in a lot of ways, and gave me a lot of freedom to be curious in a way that I was never allowed to be growing up. But also, every time I drank, I always had this intuition that it was all about getting to medicine people, that they still existed. I still knew they existed. And so it was always my intention to do this so that I could get to them.
Mm.
And because I knew they knew how to cure this. And and so I think that was sort of a guiding star for me the whole time. And that there was also something really special about the fact that I was willing to go to ayahuasca alone, and also respect that I would not have done so if there had been any other way. That this was like, I was only doing it because I had no other options, but I'd rather take it than not do it. And so I think the spirit of ayahuasca was gracious in a lot of ways and helpful. But I had a lot going on, also. But the visions that I had at the time, were, I think that some certain ancestors came and helped me as well. During that time, I was able to make certain connections, and I think that there were Icaros actually, because like time and space, like time is not linear,
Mm.
and so I do believe that there that the maestros, they can chant, but they can also chant to different places in time that you are. So I do believe that I had some magic during that time. I just wasn't aware of it.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you must have.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
The logical brain's like, well, she had to have, you know? Otherwise, like, it's led you to this moment now, I suppose, with the
yeah,
plant medicines.
yeah. But it was never, I think I was lucky enough just to have that, like I said, that intuition. It was never like, we're doing this for fun. I'm doing this for like self-exploration or whatever, or this idea that ayahuasca existed separately from the experts in the Amazon who really understand it. I was always very aware that there were people who really understood this medicine, and that I
Mm.
was not one of them. And I was just fumbling in the dark just to get myself in some kind of condition to where I could go to the jungle. And so I think that intention always really served me.
Wow. Wow. You've got very amazing intuition.
I don't know. We just have our sensibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, there are so many things I want to ask you just because, like, I feel like every time I always have more questions. I talk with you, I'm always like, okay, I have another question now, but like, I know we have to like start to wrap up because you've got a commitment. So I guess I'll ask you like to make most use of our time here. Um, mm. Well, maybe if there's a time for like two more questions.
Yeah.
But hmm. Okay. As this is a question I had prepared too. As an adoptee and Korean American, how have your identity and ancestral lineage informed the relationship that you have now with the Shipibo traditions? And then part two of that question is, and what responsibility do you feel towards cultural stewardship?
So interestingly, I don't consider myself to be Korean or American
You're
because
just an
I'm,
alien. You're just an alien superstar, Miok.
well, yeah, I mean, I don't speak Korean. I'm not part of the culture. If I keep my mouth shut, I can pass, but not even really because like I'm so gay and like my clothes aren't Korean at all. So, I go to Korea, I think people think I'm Japanese, because I don't
Oh.
speak Korean and look really gay. Um, so, so I'm not Korean. I'm not Korean culturally. I don't have any of the issues that Korean women have who have been exposed to a lot of Korean conditioning. Um, yeah, so I'm genetically, I mean, in some ways I am, like I've mentioned to you, I like really bad music, so maybe that's part of my
Yeah.
Korean heritage. But but yeah, I'm not particularly drawn to Korean stuff. It's not yeah, like I don't think any of that stuff is genetic. I think it's just kind of a matter of taste.
Mm,
I do like a lot of the Korean film that's coming out by really interesting directors, and some really great writers are coming out of Korea. But I think that's more of a circumstance of any culture that's really gone through it and then have risen economically to actually get an education. Like that's just what happens in cultures that happens to you because you have this really special connection between real life and real experience with education. Like you don't have what we were talking about maybe earlier with that sort of like elite ancestry. And that always makes for it's like people who have lived interesting stories and have the education to like tell it well.
mm,
That happens in like a very short like span, and then it's over. There's like an Overton window for that. Um, yeah, and I don't consider myself American, although sort of culturally I am, but also that's like uh with this process I'm in now, I'm that's being really challenged. My cultural Americanness, my attachment to pop culture and things like that are getting shaken up in this process. I obviously speak English. I have an American accent, but I've always thought of myself, I think, as like not like transgendered, but like transnational, not even international, but like transnational,
mm,
because in a way, it's sort of like there's like different concentric circles of narcissism. And so many people like, we suffer so much from our parents in one place because, we think that our parents are so great. Yeah, we like I have the best mom, and it's like, why? Because it's your mom. Like, what other moms were you raised by also to compare it to? Like, it's just your own personal attachment. And likewise, the great Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw said that, uh, patriotism is thinking your country is the best country simply for the fact that you were born in it. And it's just like, yeah, so all of this is so coincidental. And so what if you're kind of like not really a part of that? It's like people
mm,
who are really attached to sports teams, and it's just like, why? You could have been born in another state and that would have been your team. Like, what do
mm,
you so like I've always kind of been like, I want good refs, like I want like really good observers who can critique and have some sort of like outside neutrality, but insider knowledge. And so I've always really appreciated that liminal space. And so it's like, yeah, I grew up in the States, in different parts of the States, and I don't think the United States is in fact united. I don't consider it to be a singular country except for its military. Um,
mm,
and but culturally, it's more different than. I mean, to me, I tend to think of like France and Germany much more similar than like Manhattan and Arkansas. Like they're not even the same time period,
Right.
those two places. And so, um, but yeah, I tend to really appreciate that liminal space and again, like the continuing deconstruction of identity that strangely the queer community can well, used to at least really engage in these deconstructions of identity, but now have recently really clung to in in sort of a tragic way, I think. Um, but back when there were less letters, I think there was a lot more talk about how you got to be fluid and you didn't need to like cling to so many labels, and that was kind of the idea of freedom.
Mhm.
um and yeah, and so and any other label can kind of learn from that as well, because people who are very staunchly what their heredity is can lose sight of that, and I think that's been a lot of teachings of being an adoptee as well.
Mm. Yeah, so that's so to me, like being in that liminal space that you described, the Shipibo people are not really in that kind of liminal space, are they? And so, well, it's really the opposite, maybe, of a liminal space. They're in a very like rooted, I suppose, place rather than a transnational, right? Um, so what made you like how so like you being in that liminal space, like how has that informed your relationship with the Shipibo traditions?
Well, I don't know if it was you, but just in thinking about being childless and then like decidedly childless, and also not being connected to a lineage and not really feeling like the curse and also the attachments of blood lineage or any other sort of lineage. I realized I had the freedom to choose. And so this is like one of the blessings that we talk about in the queer community as well, because often there's like a break in your quote unquote family. And then so there's this whole thing about going out for chosen family
Mm,
and, going from the biological to the logical family after you go through your initiation of who you are when you're not no longer just a kid who, disagrees with your parents.
mm,
And so for me, it was like, okay, so my whole, like I was adopted, so I don't have a Korean family, and then my whole adopted family is dead. And so now what? And I realized that I could then choose my lineage in a sense. Like I can't go back in time. And it's not like I want to pretend to be indigenous or Shipibo, like I'm so not. But in terms of where my life energy goes into and whose children I invest in, and what culture I would like to see and be a part of, helping to live on because I really believe in it. I chose the Shipibo, and I also choose some other indigenous, like I mentioned before, um, support some very dear Tibetan family in refugee camps in Nepal, the Kirati. I really admire in so many ways in Nepal, who actually are very, very similar. I think they're actually I think they're sibling culture to the Shipibo. And one of my dreams is to get those kids together for ceremony because, man, they're gonna blow it out. Like to me, I think they're exactly the same. I think they were probably like separated maybe like 140,000 years ago.
wow.
Um, and yeah, because they're like, it's insane actually how similar their language, everything is. Their sort of more secret teachings, same. It's pretty wild. Um, so, but yeah, I, when you don't have something prescripted, you get to write your own story. You get to live your own path. And like if you don't have some, prefab life, like prefabricated life that you're supposed to live, you get to sort of do what Nietzsche alluded to, which is like, make your life a work of art.
Mm.
And when you have that sort of creative freedom in life, which the exact energy of life is creativity. And and so the more aligned you can get with those energies, the more choices you realize you actually have.
Mm.
And once I realized that, I saw that it wasn't even so much the Shipibo or family or something like that. Uh, Even though I love them very much and I think of them probably more a family than I ever have anyone. Um, that really it's about like plants are the family because plants are the beings who have connected me to the cosmos and
Mm.
all of the elements in that I know of, and therefore all of the elements within myself as well.
Uh-huh.
And to me, the people who offer the clearest and cleanest connection for that are the Shipibo, hands down.
Nice.
I've been to a lot of healers. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. I worked for um, a big doctor at Harvard. I've just experienced so many different traditions, and yeah, the Shipibo is the ring that I threw my hat on into, and it was for a reason.
Mm. Well, I'm so glad that I got to work with you.
Yeah, and you still do.
Yes, yeah, I plan to for as long as possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, Miok, I really like appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate who you are, not just these identities that like we like to label people with, like, oh, Korean American, all that stuff. Outside of that, just your energy, your soul, your spirit. Just really appreciate you. And so thank you for being who you are.
Thank you so much.